Okay, let's unpack this. Take a moment. Think about the stories shaping your world. I mean, not just fiction, but, history lessons, national narratives, the tales we tell ourselves.
We tend to see them as just entertainment or simple facts.
Right. But what if they're actually much more powerful? What if they actively build our reality, justify political orders, even decide who gets seen as human?
And the really tricky part, what happens when those stories we depend on are deliberately built to hide the truth?
Exactly. And that's precisely what this book digs into. It's this deep look at the power of stories, history, memory, all seen through the author's own journeys and his thoughts on writing.
It's quite a journey in itself.
It really is. And, wrestling with tough ideas like these, pushing for real reflection and critical thinking, that's something we really value.
Yeah.
That's why we started Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel. It uses AI analysis to help you engage with complex ideas, much like this book challenges us to do.
That makes sense. And the book itself starts, well, fittingly, with the author's own story about stories, his childhood.
Yeah, he talks about finding survival, escape, a way to figure out the world through words. Didn't matter where they came from, did it?
Not at all. Could be the World Book Encyclopedia, some book on deadly insects, African glory, or even listening to hip-hop artists like Kool G Rap.
What I found interesting was that early on, he didn't make that distinction we often make, between high and low art.
Right. If it hit him, if it stuck with him, it was important. Simple as that.
But then, as he got older, reading writers like Frederick Douglass, Audre Lorde,
Yeah.
he had this realization.
A crucial one. That writing couldn't just be for fun or escape. It had to do something.
Illuminate things, confront violence, connect beauty and politics. That link is key.
It circles back to that idea he stresses. You cannot act upon what you cannot see.
And to see clearly, especially when systems use, as he calls it, dead language and dead stories to keep a dead world going, well, you need this intense hunger for clarity.
And that hunger isn't easy. The book argues that if you really chase clarity, you bump up against not just the myth's power uses, but your own myths too, even the ones meant for liberation.
That's a tough balance.
Yeah.
How do you hold on to truths while questioning the stories that might, hide other difficult things?
Yeah. And this book actually came out of that struggle. It started as notes for his students at Howard, notes on language, politics, writing.
Written after those trips to Senegal and Palestine, right?
Exactly. So he calls it a kind of late assignment now for young writers everywhere.
You can see his parents' influence, too, his mother's artistic side, that appreciation for craft.
Right, the science fair projects, the skep pads, seeing the how of making things.
And his father, the sketch saying, "Daddy reads all the time."
Mm-hmm.
And that other caption, "Daddy says he reads to learn."
That's the kicker, isn't it? Reading not just as a pastime, but actively seeking knowledge to understand.
For the author, learning had to be, tangible. He needed to see ideas work in different sentences, connect them to images, stories.
He mentions trying to make, 7th grade math make sense by linking it to business loans or sharecropper debt, real-world stuff.
And that's what he sees in writing. It makes the abstract real, makes you feel it.
He brings up Catherine Schultz's piece, the really big one, about the Cascadia earthquake.
Oh, yeah, that was terrifyingly effective. She took this distant disaster
and made it visceral, using everyday details, refrigerators walking, houses collapsing, that fusion of beauty and politics. It makes you understand, but it also makes you want to do something.
Which is the opposite of that banking education idea from Paulo Freire, where students just passively receive info.
Exactly. The book argues that passivity serves oppressors. They don't want the world revealed or changed.
Because if you see clearly, you start asking questions about justice.
Mm-hmm. And the book doesn't shy away from the complexity of learning from, say, Ezra Pound or Thomas Jefferson, writers with amazing skill, but, deeply troubling views.
How do you navigate that? Taking the insight while rejecting the harmful politics.
It's a constant tension. So, moving from that personal history, the book takes us on these physical journeys. First, Senegal.
And he arrives with this dim fear. It becomes a terrible realization when he sees some abandoned gym equipment near the hotel.
Yeah, that triggers the voice of the niggerologist, as he calls it. This awful internalized fear.
That may be, despite his upbringing steeped in African history, the racist myths about black people might hold some truth. It sounds incredibly painful.
Especially in a place he hoped would feel like coming home. A real confrontation with internalized stuff.
Outside the hotel, though, it's different. A lively beach scene.
Yeah. cosmopolitan families. But he still feels this, like, pinhole of sadness watching a bartender, wondering if it's his own loneliness.
Then exploring Dakar, the city sounds like a mix.
A slow unfolding. He calls it steampunk. Old and new colliding, grace and breakdown together. Potholes and elegant suits. Resilience.
But the key moment seems to be at the ocean.
Oh, absolutely. He feels pulled to the water, jumps in, the quote shock, and then he hears the ghosts singing. A feeling of triumph, like he'd beaten history itself. Connecting to ancestors forced across that ocean, the land asking, what took you so long?
A really profound emotional moment. He also talks about the beauty of the people there.
Yes. Finding the Senegalese strikingly beautiful, a kind of shock realizing the deepest and blackest part of us is really beautiful, challenging his own past insecurities.
But Senegal also brought complications around race and identity.
Big time. He talks to people who don't live under the American one-drop rule, and their perspectives are, well, different.
How so?
Well, LeBron James is black, okay, but Beyoncé, mixed. Jay-Z is black, rapper. Steph Curry starts mixed, singer, then becomes black, basketball. His wife, mixed.
And the author himself.
He's told he's mixed.
That must have been jarring.
But here's the really chilling part, that mixed look. It's highly valued in Senegal, seen as cool, glamorous, beautiful.
Okay.
And he sees some women trying to achieve it. Straightening hair, lightening skin. And the book draws this devastating conclusion. That valued look is itself a marker of the ordeal, an inheritance of the mass rape from slavery.
So the American one-drop rule,
Yeah.
its shadow reaches across the ocean.
Exactly. He references Toni Morrison's Pauline wanting white beauty. Here, the target is black Americans. Even back home, Pauline wouldn't be safe. It's a painful twist.
Wow, that's heavy. What about Gorée Island?
He goes there, acknowledging it's more of an imagined origin point, a symbol. Scholarship shows fewer people pass through than the story often suggests. A peg for the hole in our story.
But does knowing the history change the feeling?
Not entirely. He still feels the weight, gets emotional on the boat ride back. The book defends the right to imagine traditions, to memory.
Like choosing Gorée as sacred?
Yes, but with a responsibility. Ask if the symbols, like seeing ourselves as pharaohs, actually serve our real needs now. It connects to that Robert Hayden line about the voyage through death to life upon these shores.
Then the journey shifts. Palestine and Israel.
And the tone changes immediately. You're plunged into the occupation. East Jerusalem, Hebron.
The feeling of constant surveillance, controlled by soldiers.
Yeah. Al-Shuhada Street in Hebron, once thriving, now ghostly, barred to Palestinians. 126 cameras watching, checkpoints stopping kids going to school.
The book lays out the legal structure pretty bluntly.
It does. Describing Israel as a place where, legally, no Palestinian is ever the equal of any Jewish person anywhere. A two-tier society, citizenship, residency, military versus civil law.
And those segregated roads, the different license plates.
Constant visual reminder, yellow for Jewish Israelis, white with green for others.
And the settlements.
Described as looking like American subdivisions, red roofs. Very different from Palestinian villages nearby.
Control over basic resources, too, like water.
Definitely. Palestinians struggling with illegal cisterns because permits are denied. Israelis using nearly 4 times the water. Settlements with country clubs, swimming pools, segregating the water itself.
That parallel he draws. One place on the planet, under American patronage, that resembled the world that my parents were born into.
Chilling. A direct link to Jim Crow.
But the book also finds resistance, right? Through storytelling.
Absolutely. It highlights Palestinian resilience. Like at Sakia, this ecological retreat near Ramallah, people reconnecting with the land.
Despite facing vandalism.
Yeah, Sahar Kawazmi talks about militias destroying things, killing fish. But she says, it is a precarious life, but there's a strong will to stay and keep working. That becomes survival. Rebuilding is resistance. He even sees a goat give birth there. Life persisting.
In Umar al-Ghubari in Lid.
Standing on a traffic island, recounting the 1948 massacre using Israeli soldiers' own words. An Israeli listener gets visibly angry. It shows the power, the threat of a storyteller challenging the official narrative.
Undermining the cover story, like Edward Said talked about.
Exactly. Then there's Nasser Nawaja in Susia, a community of shacks.
Because their traditional cave homes were taken, declared an archaeological site.
Right. Near an ancient synagogue found by Israelis. And they can't get permits to build new homes in Area C under military control. So Israel demolishes structures one by one.
Nasser calls it apartheid.
He does. Says the courts are a tool of the oppressor. Susia only hangs on because of international eyes.
The book also includes firsthand history, like meeting Mr. Jaber.
A survivor of the Deir Yassin massacre in 1948, his story is harrowing. Fighting till the last bullet, seeing his brother executed, being tasked as a kid with saving his little sisters.
And his statement, "We never expected that we would go 76 years, and we cannot go back."
So powerful. His family now numbers 150 descendants carrying the message. Liberation through education and never forget.
And the Palestinian journalists he talks to.
Deanna Othman, Noor Ali, Tariq Khalil, they talk about the daily struggles. Deanna teaches the book, and her students ask, yeah, but about the Israel part. Her own fight to write freely as a Palestinian journalist, it links to that study the book mentions by Mahan Assar. U.S. opinion pages prefer writing about Palestinians not letting them write. Less than 2% of op-eds by Palestinians over 50 years.
So who controls the narrative? Controls the perception of humanity?
That's the crux of it. But he also speaks with Israeli activists from breaking the silence.
Former soldiers opposing the occupation.
Right. Guy Batavia calls Israel's founding a sin, a center of Jewish supremacy. Avner Gavriyahu describes terrifying house raids, hostage tactics, no warrants, handcuffing people, pointing guns at kids.
Making children wet themselves from fear. Awful.
And the flying checkpoints, Avner explains, aren't random for security. They're intentionally random to make Palestinians constantly feel occupied. We're here and we're there.
The book is clear this isn't about false balance, both sides.
No. It's about hearing those challenging what the author sees as an immoral reality. He says he'd sooner hear a defense of cannibalism than a defense of the occupation.
Then the book critiques the founding Zionist narratives.
Showing the colonial language used, Herzl seeing Palestine as sparsely populated, somewhere to expropriate gently.
Jabotinsky's Iron Wall, acknowledging resistance but seeing Arabs as centuries behind. Ben Yehuda urging Jews to colonize it, become masters. Begin saying Jews are not Zulus.
All reinforcing a hierarchy. And it continues, Ari Shavit describing Arab cities as chaos, filth, contrasting with Europe, even though London was filthy too. The barbaric native story persists.
The historical parallels drawn are really provocative.
Yeah. Germans studying U.S. segregation laws, Hitler viewing the world racially, Slavs fighting like Indians, a Ukrainian woman comparing Hitler's occupation to Uncle Tom's Cabin.
And post-WWII U.S. treatment of Jewish refugees.
Yeah.
Poor treatment, restricted immigration while recognizing Israel.
The book argues this helped create a specific kind of Jewish whiteness, keeping Jews over there, fighting natives, which granted entry into the fraternity of Western nations.
Through righteous violence. That's a stark framing.
It is, connecting it to narratives like Exodus, the swift sword, the IDF's purity of arms, casting Israelis as noble warriors against savages, which resonated in America during Vietnam.
He visits the City of David site in East Jerusalem, calls it an archaeological amusement park.
Right, a search for reassurance of roots, using archaeology to build this unbroken narrative of Jewish nationhood, a title deed to the land.
But it felt fake to him.
Yeah, a poorly wrought fairy tale. Exaggerated claims. He quotes an archaeologist saying the main site is later, King David might not have lived. Archaeology is interpretation.
He describes guard dogs at a settlement nearby as a terrible chimera, suggesting violent impotence, like lynching mobs in security.
And the destruction of the Moroccan quarter near the Western Wall, ostensibly for worship space, but really destroying any competing claim. Brute literalism.
Connecting murky ancestral claims to very real land claims today.
And the site is run by settlers aiming to push Palestinians out, using archaeology and tourism to link Jewish heritage and ownership, creating a generation that can't imagine anything else. A slow but constant ethnic cleanse.
His reaction sounds intense. Ignorance, anger at journalism, pain at the U.S. parallels, Black Bottom, Rosewood, Tulsa.
And then the direct U.S. connection, a plaque there, U.S. flag, ambassador's name, saying America's spiritual bedrock comes from Jerusalem. This site forms an unbreakable bond.
Making it personal for the American listener. This evil, as he calls it, done in your name.
Which leads into the discussion of the Nakba, the catastrophe. Not just 1948, but ongoing ethnic cleansing. A plunder of your home, near and perpetual.
The irony of the Holocaust Memorial, Yad Vashem being near Deir Yassin, a massacre that helped enable the state, the arc bent and the circle broke.
Revisiting that idea of Jewish whiteness achieved via fighting natives, gaining entry through righteous violence. Some Israelis felt shame. Holocaust victims didn't fight back, fueling this narrative of strength. IDF, Mossad becoming synonyms for righteous violence.
And the pain for Israelis like Avner and Guy, realizing their part in a system of Jewish supremacy. Victims and victimizers flowing.
So after all that, what's the takeaway? The book hammers home. History isn't neutral. It justifies or condemns power. Stories order reality. Art makes politics possible.
And oppressive systems. They're cowardly. They hide in the dark, use dead language and dead stories.
Which makes writing critical thinking absolutely vital. We need more writers challenging those dominant stories. Attacks on critical teaching are attacks on future writers, on imagination itself.
Writing shouldn't just state truth, but communicate the ecstasy of a truth. Set readers on fire.
He finds strength in an ancestral gift, skepticism from living on the edge of democracy, a folk wisdom. But it's hard to hold on to that, especially in places like newsrooms.
But it's not all critique, is it? There's resilience.
Definitely. The stories of Palestinians preserving history, rebuilding, teaching, that's a spiritual advantage born from material handicap, real strength.
So the goal is to expand the frame of humanity, tell the erased stories.
Yes, shift the perspective, but be wary of using the oppressor's symbols. Sometimes you just say your word, let it stand, and leave.
It's an incredibly powerful book. It really makes you see how stories operate, from the personal to the national level, justifying power, enabling oppression, that constant struggle for clarity.
And engaging with challenging stuff like this is so important for thinking critically. We hope people explore these ideas further, maybe using resources like Mindful Moments on our YouTube channel or our podcasts.
Absolutely. And maybe here's a final thought to chew on. If oppressive power needs darkness and unexamined stories, then the light we need is that hunger for clarity, the courage to really look at the stories we live by, especially our own. That's how we might imagine something different.
Well said. So we hope you'll subscribe for more explorations like this one.
Yeah, please share this with anyone you think would find it valuable.
And consider getting the book, the links provided, to really grapple with these ideas directly.
Most importantly, though, commit to thinking critically about the narrative shaping your world. It matters.